Hello, this is Claus Jensen presenting Game 3 of the Candidates Semifinal match between Gata and Kamsky-Gelfand. The first two games were both drawn, and as the match is only 4 regular games, this was the last chance for Kamsky to win with the white pieces. And that clearly showed in the game. Kamsky is white, Gelfand is black, and as in Game 1, the match we have a Sicilian game. So E4, C5, knight f3, d6, d4, c takes d, knight takes d, knight f6, knight c3, a6. And again we have a Sicilian knight off. Bishop e3 from Kamsky, e5, and this time Kamsky chooses a different line than in Game 1. He plays knight b3, bishop e7, and then comes the very rare move h3. Looks as if Kamsky wants Gelfand out of preparation as quickly as possible. Bishop e6, a natural move here, queen f3, knight bd7 and g4. Aggressive play from Kamsky. h6, castling queenside and rook c8. And now Kamsky wants to play h4, g5, but he cannot play h4 now because the g4 pawn would be hanging. And the logical rook g1 could fail to rook takes c3, the exchange sacrifice here, b takes c3 and queen c7, leading to a sharp position with good counterplay for Gelfand. So I guess these considerations of the h4 pawn, g4 pawn hanging if he plays h4, and this exchange sacrifice led to the aggressive move knight d5 instead. Because the point here is that of course Gelfand cannot take with the knight, because then e takes d5 and the bishop is trapped. So Gelfand plays bishop takes d5, and after e takes d5, now this bishop on e6 is no longer there, and it makes h4 possible for Kamsky because now g4 is not hanging. Gelfand plays the natural knight b6, and then comes h4 as planned, and queen c7, threatening a mate on c2, so c3 is played, and here Gelfand takes the pawn on d5, which has been sacked by Kamsky, and it looks tempting to take on d5, but taking on d5 with rook takes d5 here doesn't work, because unfortunately black can pin the rook with queen c6, and if bishop g2 then e4. When queen goes to f5 then it's chased away again by g6, and the rook cannot be defended. So this doesn't work. So Kamsky plays bishop d2, knight b6, and of course now Kamsky has to continue his aggressive plan. He has sacked a central pawn and has to grab some initiative as compensation. So g5, knight f to g7, g takes h6 and g takes h6. And now Kamsky has executed the plan h4 g5. And what to do now? What's the next plan? Kamsky seems to be in doubt, so he plays a waiting move which has been criticized by experts. He played king b1. And I think that we shall see later why it might be a better idea to play bishop h3 here. But king b1 came, and now queen c6, forcing the white queen to h3 to defend the unprotected rook on h1. And this is this h3 square was possibly more suitable for the bishop. So perhaps this is the most important reason why bishop h3 on the previous move was better than king b1. d5 came from Gelfand, who probably wants to give his queen the square e6. And an interesting option here for Kamsky was perhaps to play f4, because after e4, white will have the d4 square for the knight. But Kamsky played bishop e2, and knight c4 came. Kamsky played bishop c1 and knight f6. And Still, it's a very complicated middle game. A lot of options for both sides, and it's very complicated. Rook h to e1, and the only compensation for the pawn seems to be that Gelfand's king is stuck in the center, and therefore Kamsky puts both his rooks in the d and e files. Queen e6, offering a queen exchange. Kamsky is obviously not interested. Queen f5 check, but now Gelfand has put his queen on a nice active square here. King a1, and now Gelfand wisely removes his king from the e file with king f8. And the question now is, what should Kamsky plan in this complex position? A plan that has been suggested by both computers and humans is to improve the position of the bishop on e2 and play bishop f1 here. The intention is clearly to play bishop h3. Again, this is a better square for the bishop than e2. But Kamsky didn't play bishop f1, he played f3. And then came bishop d6. And e4 with the discovered attack on the queen is a threat now. So queen g1. And the question here is Kamsky eyeing the a7 square here? Gelfand thinks so, thought so, and played bishop b8. And now comes bishop d3, chasing the queen away from its active position on f5. And it's actually not easy to find a comfortable square because of the white rooks in the e and the d files. For example, queen d7 here could be met by f4. And when Gelfand plays e4, then bishop takes e4, taking advantage of the pin in the d file. And also unpleasant looks queen e6, because now knight d4 is possible due to the pin in the e file. And after queen b6, then all of a sudden Kamsky has nothing against the queen exchange, because now his knight is activated. Knight f5, queen takes, rook takes, and Gelfand has managed to exchange the queens, but the h6 pawn is falling because Kamsky has been able to activate the knight. So this is also looking good for Kamsky. So in view of all these unpleasant possibilities, Gelfand played queen h5. But this is in fact an even bigger blunder or problem for black, because now Kamsky could find the very strong idea bishop takes c4, and after d takes c4 he could play queen b6 with threats on f6 and b7. Queen takes f3 defends both f6 and b7, but white simply removes the knight from the attack of the c4 pawn, knight a5, and now the main threat is rook f1, which would lead to a win of the knight on f6, and also b7 is hanging, and black is lost in this position. So bishop takes c4 would have won the game for Kamsky, but he didn't find this move. He played queen h1 instead. And bishop a7 followed. And I think that Kamsky misses such an opportunity as he did on the previous move only shows that this game is very complicated with loads of possibilities on each move. Queen h3 followed. Rook has to move to e8. And now Kamsky sees the bishop takes c4 idea, but this time it's of course not as decisive as it would have been a few moves ago. And knight a5 with a double attack on the b7 and c4 pawns. But it looks nice, but Gelfand has e4 with a discovered attack on the knight. And knight takes c4, then he can take on f3. And again, exchanging queens is not in Kamsky's interest, because queen takes f3, e takes, rook f1, and f2 would be very dangerous for Kamsky. So instead, he plays queen h2. And Now white threatens rook f1, but Gelfand sees this in time trouble and plays knight g4. Queen c7 follows, bishop f2, rook f1, and e3. And all of a sudden, Gelfand is able to put pressure on Kamsky in their mutual side node. And now Kamsky collapses with only a few minutes on the clock and plays the slightly desperate bishop takes e3. The correct line was, and it's very difficult to find in a complicated game with only a few minutes on the clock, but the correct line was queen d6 check, king g8, queen d7. But this is of course extremely difficult to find. So bishop takes e3, knight takes e3, and now Kamsky plays knight e5 with a double attack on the queen and f7. And a quick answer for you: where do you put your queen as black? On f5 or h5, or do you take the knight on e5? Quick, you only have a few seconds left on the clock. Queen f5 was actually played in the game by Gelfand, but the correct move in the position is queen h5, because then rook d7, queen takes e5, rook takes f7, and king g8 would hold everything together for Gelfand. And also not working is rook takes e5, because then queen takes e5. And now the problem is that the rook on h8 is not defended. So knight takes d1, then queen takes h8, king e7, queen e5 check, king f8, and then queen d6 check, and then the knight on d1 is falling. Complicated stuff to see with only a few seconds on the clock. But queen f5 was what was played, and again a quick question: what would you play as white here? The correct answer is queen c5 check, king g7, queen takes e3, because now the bishop is pinned to the queen. So rook takes e5, queen takes f2, queen takes f2, and rook takes f2. And all of a sudden the time control has been reached, and we are having big blunders on both sides in a very complicated middle game, and now the game has simplified into an equal double rook endgame. And the game went on for 12 more moves, but never left equilibrium. So what followed was rook h to e8, rook g1 check, king f8, king b1, rook e2, rook f4, rook 8 to e4, rook g to f1, rook e1 check, king c2, rook 4 to e2 check, king b3, rook takes f1, rook takes f1, king g7, rook f4, rook e6, a4, king g6, king c4, f5, a5, king f6, king d3, rook e7, and here the game was finally drawn. And I think this was probably the most interesting game in the candidate matches so far. Kamsky really wanted to win, so he chose a rare line in the knight off and sacked a pawn so that he could play his h4 g5 plan, and thus preventing Gelfand from castling. And the resulting middle game was extremely complicated, and Kamsky played a little hesitantly. Gelfand seemed to be in control, but then he played the dubious bishop b8, and after bishop d3 he had an unpleasant choice of where to put his queen. He chose the poorest option, and Kamsky could have won the game with bishop c4 followed by queen b6. Kamsky missed this opportunity, and in mutual time trouble Gelfand managed to put Kamsky under pressure with his passed e-pawn, and Kamsky made a very human side note blunder, and all of a sudden Gelfand seemed to be winning. But he blundered as well, and after the time control we had this equal double rook endgame. I hope you enjoyed this highly entertaining game, and I hope to see you on my blog at klausjensen.com. Bye bye for now.